If you're Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius rising, and you want to create financial abundance for yourself, you need to be okay with being insecure. But as I'm sure you'll agree with me, for you, i.e. a fire sign, insecurity is like not in the vocabulary. What do you mean I'm insecure? I'm not insecure. I can never be insecure. And before I lose you completely and you like really dislike me because I dared to say something like that to you, let me unpack this and make it clear and reveal the nuances of this statement of mine. So as I always do in this series of astrology of money, I start by explaining briefly, reminding you how your sense of self, which is all about that phenomenal, wonderful, so attractive, so loved confidence of a fire sign, and how that really doesn't sit well with your 8th house, the house of wealth, the house of how you are meant to make lots of money. So that place in your chart is really at odds with this sense of how you feel about yourself. Like, what do you mean I'm not confident, or I can be insecure? Right? That is because the 8th house for you, where all this happens, wealth gets created, is in water element. You have water sign, whether that's Cancer, Pisces, or Scorpio, you have that in your 8th house. And that element is all about insecurity. And here comes the unpacking of the actual word. So what do I mean by insecurity in terms of a water element? It's a state of vulnerability, which is typically, even for yourself, is a sense of insecurity because we are vulnerable, we are exposing ourselves, and we either trust that we will be handled well, or we trust ourselves that no matter how mishandled we will be okay. But in both is a sense of deep insecurity because it comes with the vulnerability terrain. And so for you to work in your 8th house, which is where your clients come to you for transformation, and therefore that's why you get more money than you would anywhere else in your chart, because people pay a lot of money to be transformed. The water element gets transformed through vulnerability, amongst other things that I'll talk about later. So the insecurity piece is really about being vulnerable and allowing yourself to not know, to not be sure, because you're creating a very safe space, essential for the 8th house water element, for your clients to transform. So you need to make them feel comfortable, and you don't do that by being super confident and like, what, insecurity in this house? No, not here. No, you don't do that. You actually invite them by being an example. So that is what I mean. Insecurity is essential for you to be okay with your own insecurity if you want to make big money. So let's now talk a little bit about water element and how it transforms its environment. And in that sense, the sentence, you are the water element, because that is your house where people come for transformation, and people are the environment. So what I'm going to be describing is how you are meant to be performing the transformation process. 2 key words that I would use to describe this process are slow and subtle. So slow because it will take a long time for, let's say, a sharp rock that just fell onto the beach to be turned into a smooth pebble. And subtle because water element regulates temperature and controls climate. Now, we don't really see how that is done. We can see how it's shaping a rough edged piece of rock into a smooth boulder or a pebble. We can see the result, and we can see always the result, right? And we can see lapping waves along on the beach and all that, but we can't actually, we need to speed up or, really zoom in to see the process being done. So the subtlety is one of the key elements of how water is transform its environment. So back to the security piece and vulnerability, this is why it's essential that there is a sense of safety and vulnerability and openness, essentially. So it's kind of like when we're vulnerable and insecure, we are open. And that openness allows for the subtlety to work itself, to has an effect. Because subtlety, if we are like like we have walls and we're all tough and we have a strong armor, subtlety will just bounce back, bounce off. It won't really reach us. So that's another reason why insecurity, vulnerability, and openness, exposed states inside your containers are essential for this work to take place. And then in terms of how that can inform what your business model is, I want you to write this down, get a pen and paper and write this down. For my clients, I create a path of transformation from erosion to nourishment. So we start from a rough, and erosion would smooth it over. The subtle work, the slow work is the sort of the starting phase, right? Where the death occurs from the rough edges, uncomfortable states, because roughness is not comfortable to sit on, it doesn't fit gently and softly into the environment. It's pokey and hard and all the qualities that water doesn't as an element, and then psychically and symbolically doesn't really, it's not its language, right? So that's why we need that to die through erosion, right? So the erosion is the death process. And then whatever the final state, the transformed state, which I'll go into specifics as I go through each rising sign, is for the client, right? That has to provide nourishment. Water is the life-giving and life-sustaining element on the planet. So the highest expression, the most alive version, the most upgraded and evolved water sign or water element is, or rather, absolutely every single time it needs to be nourished by that state. And it is. But the nourishment is really important to understand that's what's gonna keep it alive and thrive. Okay, so let me now zoom out a little bit and just talk about the business piece. Generally speaking, that's the zooming out I meant. So what kind of business in general terms this could be or should be? It is the kind that uses the language of nourishment, of smoothing over the rough edges. It needs to provide ways and structures, fluid structures, for the flow to be uninterrupted. It needs to foster sensitivity, support sensitivity, use the sensitive language, emotional language, language of feelings in promotional materials. Imagination should be integral to any packages, any processes, any work that you're doing with a client. Depth focus, catering for needs, no logic, no analysis, no brain. The only worthy, close to mind and mental activity and thinking is imagination piece. Otherwise, stay clear of all the rational way of approaching anything. And in terms of what kind of clients you are set up to attract, you would be calling in the most sensitive kind, the imaginative kind, the artists, the poets, the spiritual people. They will be looking for guidance. They may also need hand-holding. Basically, sensitive souls. Okay, so let's now look at each rising sign. So I'm going to start with Sagittarius rising because I want to start with a Cancer water sign in the 8th house. So we're looking at Sagittarius first, then Aries, and then Leo rising sign. And for each of you, I will be offering you 3 suggestions that you can use to create your business offers. So for Sagittarius rising, I have 3 suggestions: incubation, roots, and mystery. And the names of these suggestions or these potential offerings are very Cancerian in their vibe. And it's because obviously you have Cancer in the 8th house. So you want to use the language of Cancer to attract the right clients. So these could be the titles of your offerings or the variation of them. And certainly I would use them. These are all the words that you want to use in your marketing material. So let's start with the first one, incubation. Here, you're moving your client from unsafety to belonging. You're transforming them through a process of incubation that you are facilitating in a safe, protective container. So the new life, i.e. the changed, transformed selves, can grow, can be nourished and nurtured and looked after until it's ready to see the light of day. So this is why I say you have to be okay with being insecure. because you will be working with insecurities on a most elemental level, not moral level, but elemental level. So the good metaphor here is a seedling, a seed, right? It's the tiniest, most insecure, most unsafe, most fragile thing, and therefore it needs all the protection one can give it before it's strong enough to walk out into the daylight, to be seen by the sun on its own. In Roots, my second suggestion, you're taking your client from the present to the past. Now, I know this sounds like the wrong way around, but actually, when you have Cancer in the 8th house, this is the right way around, because the Cancer archetype is rooted, is grounded in the past. It flourishes from what came before it. It thrives on history, whether that's by taking it as it is, assimilating it, and obviously, there's never the same repetition of what was before, but some kind of version as filtered through their present, themselves, right? But often is also what also happens is that the past has been reclaimed and rewritten so that the wrongs have been righted. And this is the most Cancerianly profound work. Looking back is actually what's going to give them themselves back, but not as a way of, like I say, just blindly repeating, but actually rooting themselves in the healthiest possible way in their past, because it is always in the present. The past is always with us. And in Mystery, my final suggestion for you, Sagittarius rising, is that you're moving your client. So here, think about the Cancer's ruling planet, but also astro body or astronomical body. Not sure, astronomy not my strong suit, which is the moon. And so the moon is the night creature, and it has a very subtle light, illuminates the landscape. And that's on a good day, meaning on the full moon or like a quarter moon or something. But at least half of the month it's quite dark anyway. You can't see mostly nothing, right? So, but the moon is there. So it's that kind of, there is fear because, so here you're working with a client from fear state about themselves, about life, about their circumstances, about the future, you name it, whatever. But the fear is because of the unknown. And so you're taking them from the fear state. And like I say, think of the moon. We need to trust that the moon is there. So the light that it's guiding us is there, even though we don't see it, like on a dark moon or when there isn't, like I say, or cloudy night, right? And so we have to use our inner compass. So the trust is now moved from trusting the outside to trusting the inside. And also like inner compass, right? But it's also about trusting one's shifting moods, because moon is the most changeable, or rather the fastest changeable in our solar system, right? I think that's the right terminology, because it changes within a month. We see it, yeah? We see the change, and it's a visible change. So that's also something you're working with them to make them feel okay about being, well, today I feel like this, but tomorrow I feel different, and that's okay. And that is okay. It's essential that that's made to be okay for them, that they get comfortable and accepting of themselves in such a way. Now, if you're Aries rising, you have Scorpio in your 8th house. And these are my 3 suggestions for your business offerings in ways that you can provide a transformation for your clients. Power, revelation, and regeneration. In your power offering, the transformation path is from control to true power. So this work is relatively self-explanatory in the sense that the client is misinterpreting what power is and therefore not getting the results that they want, or on the surface they're getting what they want, but the feeling is very hollow. Even if they seem like they're winning or getting what they want, right? It never feels satisfying. It always feels amiss and just wrong, right? In revelation, you are moving your client from deception to truth. So this would be self-deception and also deception in terms of relationships. But basically, it's sort of at the root of it is fear of truth. So you're working with the fear of truth to get them to be comfortable and accepting and courageous and have the capacity to receive the truth, because it's a high sensation experience to receive the truth. You need to sort of coach them into expanding their, I keep talking about coaching because I said this elsewhere as well, it's the only kind of way I do work, or it's my world, so I'm sorry, but you can still use this to figure out for you whatever other kind of business ideas that you have that are outside of coaching. Except that actually having water signs in the being a fire sign rising and having water signs in your 8th house, you are kind of set up more than maybe some other clients to be doing the emotional work with them, which is often either therapy. Sorry, therapy is another word I forgot, as well as coaching. And so yeah, so you're kind of more set up that way anyway. So you're probably most likely to be either in therapy or coaching, right? So you're coaching your client out of fear of truth by expanding their capacity to receive high sensation emotions that are intense, paradoxical feelings, so that they're not shattered by that. And that is why they were deceiving themselves or the world around them, or both. It typically is both, right? And the last one, regeneration. Here you're moving your client from limitation to revitalization. So this is kind of similar to the first one, the power, except that here the client is scared of their power. Where in the first one, they were exercising their power just over other people. They were very comfortable being, like they're the sort of the traditional villains of the Marvel universe, let's say. They're very comfortable, like I say, controlling others and others not having a problem with them. Here it's not that at all. But it's similar in the sense that they're afraid of their own power, so they're limited, and you're basically coaching them back into their power, which then revitalizes them, which is the piece about nourishment. For every single one of these, nourishment is essential, as in that's always the result. They're nourished by that transformed state. So here, the limitation is the self-imposed limitation, in that, oh no, I can't, no, it's dangerous, I can't do this power thing, I don't have power, I feel limited, I feel oppressed, or whatever, right? And then you're basically unshackling them. And as they realize and step into their power, they are revitalized. But they never had a problem with controlling others and externalizing their power. It was actually just held in and never expressed, where the others expressed it aplenty. And lastly, for Leo rising and Pisces in the 8th house, my 3 suggestions for your potential business offerings are surrender, melancholy, and incarnation. In surrender offering, you're moving your client from the state of overwhelm to a regulated state. So your 8th house clients will come to you with very Piscean problems. That's the whole point of using astrology, to help you understand what your clients are, right? And how to work with them. And one big Piscean problem is porousness and openness, and like they're open to everything, and they're feeling everything, and it's just too much. Everything is really too much. And so, because Pisces is not familiar, it's the idea of control, of anything kind of gripping and holding and being firm and hard, even like immovable, let's say, and solid and dense. All of that is alien to Pisces. It just doesn't get it. So when you have none of that in your psyche, let's say, everything is just, there's no barrier, there's no boundary, there is none of that kind of protection. They don't have that naturally. They're not born with it. I'm talking archetypes, right? It's not any particular person. And certainly, like I say, I often remind everyone here that the client doesn't have to be Pisces. They may be, but they don't have to be Pisces at all. It's not about that. It's about the work is Piscean. So then you basically are coaching them into how to regulate them. So this could be the breath work, the all kind of like a bodily, and also this could be also mental. With Pisces, it could be actually mental, like mental work, like thinking would be. This is probably I did say at the beginning that it shouldn't be any logic and rational, but here I think would be helpful, because it's a way of anchoring themselves and regulating themselves, to be kind of using words as maybe journaling and also conversation with you. Mercurial activity is actually welcome here, I would say. In melancholy, you are moving your client from denial to imagination. Now, this is a tricky one. This is not for everyone. By that I mean, not every Leo rising will be up for this. This is about suffering. In Piscean world, suffering is inspirational. And their suffering by extension and by association, they can also obviously be directly suffering like any other human. The beauty of Pisces is that it can feel, because of the porousness I talked about before, it feels as if it's happening to itself, herself, themselves, right? But it's not. It's just by association and, by thinking, by being in a proximity, by hearing about it, by watching a movie, right? But because it's very vapor-like energy and element, when you have Pisces as a water element in your 8th house, nothing really is heavy. So this suffering is not heavy. It's light in that way, and yet the feeling is there. So that's what's so conducive to imagination, as in this is essentially a creative coach. You could have a creative coaching business where you are helping people to move from their suffering by creatively expressing themselves and alchemizing that suffering that they're either directly experiencing themselves, or they're just, like I say, they're surrounded, the world is on fire and they're just suffering for the world, even though they're like on dry land and with plenty of water around them, right? They're not on fire, but they're still feeling all of it. So having an imaginative outlet and having a structured sort of way, like poetry is fantastic, or painting, canvas, anything that's sort of material that will kind of bring them down, but also give them a tool to express this. And my last suggestion, incarnation. Here you are moving your client from escapism to enablement. So again, Piscean theme of escapism is connected to the overwhelm, because it's like there's so much and they're actively escaping it. So that's a remedy to overwhelm. So it's a different client. The other one is actually in the overwhelm and that's all it's feeling. And the other client in the incarnation offer is escaping. So they found a way to deal with the overwhelm by escaping, but they're also finding themselves, well, I escaped, so what now? Similar problem, they're just not engaging with life. So here you are moving them, you're taking them out of the escapism, but escapism is an addiction. So this is extra careful work, and potentially even sort of specialist work. It obviously depends on the extent of escapism and the kind, right? And we see if it's actual addiction, kind of drug or alcohol or something. Well, even other ones like sex or food. I know certainly food for me. I didn't have addiction counseling ever, but yeah, a lot of literature around addiction has helped me. So I'm trying to kind of unpack the potential pitfalls and the minefield in case you need to consider this from somewhat specialist and trained perspective, as in, are you trained and specialized in this or not? Or maybe it's not, or be very clear up front that this is not it's not therapy in that sense. It's just a more light-hearted, light-footed way of dealing with the escapist tendencies. So therefore the escapist tendency can't be too intense and too heavy, is something you want to clarify up front. And then, so the things you're doing is sort of the way you're remedying that. This would be the embodiment work, is an amazing way of like enabling them, basically embodying, meaning enabling them to come down into themselves, i.e. body, really. For Pisces, is that kind of earth element is essential to bring it in somehow, so that they're brought down to earth where they can live a life, right? As opposed to in some kind of imaginary world. Or so embodiment, dancing, any kind of physical practice, but it's gentle. That dancing is a beautiful one because it's flow and movement, and Pisces is very much like that. And that's that. So hopefully this was helpful, and please let me know in the comments how any of this resonated, if you're already doing something like this. So yeah, I'd love to hear your stories around these subjects and themes for all of you fire rising signs. And thank you for watching.